The Little Match Girl. It was terribly cold. It snowed and was already almost dark, and evening came on, the last evening of the year. In the cold and gloom, a poor little girl, bareheaded and barefoot, was walking through the streets. When she left her own house, she certainly had had slippers on. But of what use were they? They were very big slippers, and her mother had used them till then, so big were they. The little maid lost them as she slipped across the road, where two carriages were rattling by terribly fast. One slipper was not to be found again, and a boy had seized the other and run away with it. He said he could use it very well as a cradle, some day when he had children of his own. So now the little girl went with her little naked feet, which were quite red and blue with the cold. In an old apron, she carried a number of matches, and a bundle of them in her hand. No one had bought anything of her all day, and no one had given her a farthing. Shivering with cold and hunger, she crept along, a picture of misery, poor little girl. The snowflakes covered her long fair hair, which fell in pretty curls over her neck. But she did not think of that now. In all the windows, lights were shining, and there was a glorious smell of roast goose, for it was New Year's Eve. Yes, she thought of that. In a corner formed by two houses, one of which projected beyond the other, she sat down, cowering. She had drawn up her little feet, but she was still colder, and she did not dare to go home, for she had sold no matches, and did not bring a farthing of money. From her father she would certainly receive a beating, and besides, it was cold at home, for they had nothing over them but a roof through which the wind whistled, though the largest rents had been stopped with straw and rags. Her little hands were almost benumbed with the cold. Ah, a match might do her good, if she could only draw one from the bundle and rub it against the wall and warm her hands at it. She drew one out. Ratch! How it sputtered and burned. It was a warm, bright flame, like a little candle. When she held her hands over it, it was a wonderful little light. It really seemed to the little girl as if she sat before a great polished stove, with bright brass feet and a brass cover. How the fire burned! How comfortable it was! But the little flame went out, the stove vanished, and she had only the remains of the burned match in her hand. A second was rubbed against the wall. It burned up, and when the light fell upon the wall, it became transparent like a thin veil, and she could see through it into the room. On the table, a snow-white cloth was spread. Upon it stood a shining dinner service. The roast goose smoked gloriously, stuffed with apples and dried plums. And what was still more splendid to behold, the goose hopped down from the dish and waddled along the floor with a knife and fork in its breast to the little girl. Then the match went out, and only the thick, damp, cold wall was before her. She lighted another match. Then she was sitting under a beautiful Christmas tree. It was greater and more ornamented than the one she had seen through the glass door last Christmas at the rich merchant's. Thousands of candles burned upon the green branches, and colored pictures like those in the print shops looked down upon them. The little girl stretched forth her hand towards them. Then the match went out. The Christmas lights mounted higher. She saw them now as stars in the sky. One of them fell down, forming a long line of fire. Now someone is dying, thought the little girl, for her old grandmother, the only person who had loved her, and who was now dead, had told her that when a star fell down, a soul mounted up to God. She rubbed another match against the wall. It became bright again, and in the brightness the old grandmother stood clear and shining, mild and lovely. "Grandmother!" cried the child. "Oh, take me with you! I know you will go when the match is burned out. You will vanish like the warm fire, the beautiful roast goose, and the great glorious Christmas tree." And she hastily rubbed the whole bundle of matches, for she wished to hold her grandmother fast. And the matches burned with such a glow that it became brighter than in the middle of the day. Grandmother had never been so large or so beautiful. She took the little girl in her arms, and both flew in brightness and joy above the earth, very, very high. And up there was neither cold, nor hunger, nor care. They were with God. But in the corner, leaning against the wall, sat in the cold morning hours the poor girl with red cheeks and smiling mouth, frozen to death on the last evening of the old year. The New Year's sun rose upon a little corpse. The child sat there, stiff and cold, with the matches of which one bundle was burned. She wanted to warm herself, the people said. No one imagined what a beautiful thing she had seen, and in what glory she had gone in with her grandmother to the New Year's joy.